Hello there, and welcome to today's mental health topic on this channel. My name is Wisdom, a trainee clinical psychologist. I hope that you find today's topic useful. Our focus for today is on anxiety, and this is one issue that the world over uh, is common, and we can think of it as something that we all experience in one form or the other. And so we'll discuss what anxiety is, and we'll look at some of the key symptoms, causes, and how we can address it. And then we'll finally look at a very simple inventory or tool that you can use to assess your anxiety level and know what steps to take afterward. So, what is anxiety? According to the APA Dictionary of Psychology, where I usually pick most of my definitions, um, anxiety is an emotion which is characterized by apprehension and somatic symptoms of tension, in which an individual anticipates impending danger, catastrophe, or misfortune. And the key elements here are the fact that anxiety is related to our emotions, and it's characterized by apprehension. And apprehension means a certain hindrance, so to speak, for taking an action, or anticipating that something will go wrong, and for that matter you find it difficult to make a step or take a decision in that regard. So we begin to withdraw or hold our feet, in taking steps, because we are afraid or we feel that things may not go right. So the 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 whole bit of anxiety causes us to become apprehensive of the future. And this is what differentiates anxiety from just fear. Fear and anxiety sometimes are used interchangeably, but fear is in the moment. So what you are experiencing in the moment. So when you have a stressful situation, a dangerous or impending uh, trouble, you will be in a state of fear, and that is an emotional response to the situation at hand. But in anxiety, that fear begins to cause you to anticipate danger for the future. You become very apprehensive of the future, and the the symptoms are both psychological as well as bodily. And so somatic symptoms are related to the body. So in a situation where, for instance, you are supposed to write an exam the next day, if you are beginning to feel anxious, you'd find that maybe you would have some headaches, or you'd have a sleepless night and all that. So those are somatic symptoms. They are symptoms relating to your body, your muscles, tensing up and all that. So anxiety is an emotion which is characterized by apprehension and somatic symptoms of tension, in which the individual who is going through that state or period of anxiety anticipates impending danger and feels that things would go wrong. So here in this, we have this picture of a woman who has many thoughts, bothering her mind, and that can, cause a lot of anxiety. Where you are thinking of school, probably she's thinking about her children's school fees, she's thinking about her parents, she's thinking about drugs, her job, maybe she's lost her job, and all that. So all of these things can be very difficult to handle, and because of that you go through stress, distress for that matter, and if it is not managed or handled well, that will result into anxiety, and particularly anxiety disorders, which we'll talk about later on. But anxiety is generally that fear of the future, or the fear that something will go wrong, something might happen which is bad or will harm you. So you have this little boy here also who feels so stressed out, feels he can't do whatever activity or task that is ahead. And because he's failed in the past before, there's that apprehension, there's that sense of I just can't do it, that sense of uh, failure that keeps him from taking any step towards the future. And that is generally what anxiety is. And there are some key symptoms of anxiety. You realize that in talking about stress, which I have done a video on, you may click on the card up there and get to that later on. But in talking about stress, anxiety, depression, you find that there are certain symptoms, there's certain signs that are common amongst them. However, the key bit of anxiety is that fear of the future, that fear that there's misfortune, there's danger, there's something that is going to go wrong. And so a lot of anxious thoughts leading to anxious feelings and anxious actions. And some of the symptoms include restlessness. So in a moment where someone is feeling anxious, anytime that situation, that event, or that thought is present, they begin to feel very nervous. So you just can't sit. You just can't be comfortable. There's this discomfort that is associated with being exposed to that thought, that environment, or that situation. So someone who feels very nervous in an exam room, they may struggle to stay comfortable and focus on writing. So there's a lot of restlessness, feeling nervous, jittery, and having to move around a lot, just to help you to gather some composure. You have insomnia. So where anxiety is persistent, you'd find that you have difficulty sleeping. So you sleep, probably you wake up, you can't sleep again, or you can't even fall asleep. So there's difficulty falling asleep, and there's difficulty staying asleep. And there are issues with headaches. So people that have, and later on when we start talking about the anxiety disorders, some who have specific phobias. So someone who has an anxiety specifically for exams, you realize that when the exams is approaching, they begin to have headaches. Some will fall sick, what we call exams fever. So headaches, migraines, are common when it comes to anxiety. And you have muscle tension and sweating, incessant muscle tension and sweating. So anytime, probably this boy, probably he failed in an exam. So because of the past failures, anytime he just hears that there's a test, there's an assessment upcoming, he begins to sweat a lot. The muscle tenses up, so that's where you feel the discomfort, and you'll be sweating in those moments. Sometimes it's just the thought that I am ugly. Somebody just, so someone with a body related issue or image related issue, just the thoughts that I am too fat, I am too slim, and all that, begins to make you very anxious. Your body tenses up, your muscle tenses up, and you begin to feel you are sweating. You may not see the sweat physically, you feel that you are sweating within, and that is a common symptom of anxiety. A lot of paranoid thoughts or fears. Paranoid thoughts or paranoia is where you feel very suspicious of other people. You feel that something will go wrong. There would be an accident, somebody would die, I would fall off. You have certain thoughts or fears that have no evidence to support them. So even in the absence of any logical or plausible reason for that happening, you feel it will happen, and you become so consumed by that, negative, irrational fear. Somebody feels that because they went for an interview and they weren't picked, that means any interview they go for, there's something wrong about me that will make them not pick me. So they, even before they go for any interview, there's this whole bit about I'll fail at it, I'll say something stupid, and they would, all, reject me and all that. So those are paranoid thoughts, or fears that have no basis for being true, but the person holds on to them so much. Some feel another person is planning to harm them when there's no, particular evidence to that effect. And when you are going through anxiety, you have difficulty making decisions. So this woman here will have a lot of things bothering her, a lot of things drawing her attention, and she feels so overwhelmed. You would not know what to pay attention to. You would be in a rush to make certain decisions, and sometimes you take longer to make a decision. And there's a lot of concentration issues, poor concentration when it comes to anxiety. So these are just some of the symptoms of anxiety. What are the causes or risk factors? There are no specific causes for anxiety, so we cannot say that this is exactly what causes anxiety. But some, things have been identified as potential causes, or what we call the risk factors. What are the things that puts you at risk, makes you vulnerable to being anxious or going through anxiety? Excessive, fear of the future. One is chronic stress, which we mentioned from the beginning. And stress, particularly negative stress, what we call distress. When you go through a stressful work schedule that builds up a lot of stress over time, you may now experience anxiety in one form or the other, moderate to severe forms of anxiety. So chronic stress is one of the possible causes or risk factors for anxiety. Sometimes it could also be a traumatic life experience. So you have this friend, or you yourself, you have been robbed before, you have been attacked at night before. That could lead to some anxiety, being developed, and by extension, a particular anxiety disorder. Um, Someone may end up with agoraphobia, which is one of the anxiety disorders, where you become so fearful, you become very anxious, and you experience all the symptoms of anxiety we talked about when you are in a space or situation that makes you feel like you are trapped. And we'll talk about those later on. So a certain experience that was traumatic in the past, some people who had very abusive childhood, suffered a lot of trauma, during their growing up. Someone who has had an accident before and all that, those could be predisposing factors to anxiety. Then we have some environmental factors that could also be contributing to anxiety. So from the physical environment as well as the social environment. There are some chemicals in the environment, industrials, areas where some chemicals are released that could be detrimental to the person's health. That could be contributing, because there are certain health related conditions that are associated with anxiety, and sometimes these toxic chemicals and all that affect us in ways that we cannot really tell. Cancers and all that developing as a result of being exposed to physical environments that are full of toxic substances. So the environment can play a role in one way or the other. There are genetic factors. Studies have shown that it could be something that can be transferred. So there could be a family line of anxiety. So someone whose parents has experienced anxiety, and we are not talking about just the normal everyday anxiety that we may sometimes feel. We are talking about anxiety that is has gone to the extent of being a mental health crisis or issue. So there could be a family line where a parent who suffered anxiety or went through clinical anxiety can end up having children who maybe one of them would also experience anxiety at one point in their life. And you could also trace that parents, great grandparents or someone within the family line suffered from anxiety. So there are some genetic factors that could be implicated in anxiety. Substance abuse and medication, particularly caffeine. So in the DSM, which is a manual that is generally worldwide used in diagnosing mental health conditions, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, you find that caffeine is one of the key risk factors for anxiety. So there's what is called the caffeine-induced anxiety, because excessive intake of caffeine can result in some of the symptoms of anxiety that we talked about. So nausea, dizziness, restlessness, insomnia, and all that. So that could be one of the substances that could lead to anxiety problems. There are some medications also that contain chemicals that can lead to some of the symptoms of anxiety that we talk about, and excessive intake of those medications can cause the individual to suffer from anxiety. So you find that sometimes there's someone going through, or you yourself, you have a health problem and you are taking a particular drug or medication, and over time you begin to feel restless, a lot of restlessness, you have difficulty sleeping and all that. So sometimes it could be related to a medication or substance abuse. You have cocaine, and so caffeine, cocaine, those are what we call stimulants, and they are central nervous system stimulants. So that means that they work in affecting the brain and how the brain related connections, chemical reactions in the brain's communication network can be affected by these drugs. And so they cause some excitement that is excessive, and that is leading to all those bits of restlessness and issues concentrating and sleeping and all that. So substance abuse and medication related issues can be implicated in anxiety. Then sometimes it could also be a problem relating to personality. So there are some personality types or characteristics that can make you prone to anxiety. So neuroticism, which is one of the personality dimensions in what we call the ocean, the big five personality traits. These individuals have problems regulating their emotions, very hyper sensitive, and all that. So chances are that such a person will likely suffer from anxiety. People that are introverts may also experience anxiety because a lot of withdrawal, wanting to be alone, may not allow them to seek help. And people that are shy, probably having low self-esteem and all that. So personality can play a role in someone experiencing anxiety. So these are just potential causes and risk factors. It doesn't mean that one particular element here is what is causing the anxiety. So if you go through professional therapy, then you can be helped to diagnose what exactly could be the factor or cause in that particular situation. But these are some of the potential causes or risk factors for anxiety. So I would want us to look at this inventory, the Beck Anxiety Inventory, which is a simple self-report assessment tool developed by American psychiatrist who died sometime last year, Aaron Beck, very, very critical in the field of psychology and psychotherapy. And it can help you to identify problems of anxiety that you may have or be having within a particular period of time, so that you can tell whether I'm going through anxiety or not. And that gives you just, an overview of the symptoms you may be experiencing, so that you can take the necessary steps, including going to see a professional psychotherapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, and all that. So when you do it well, it can really be helpful. So a note of caution, you need a more detailed assessment by a professional psychologist, psychiatrist, or mental health counselor to be diagnosed with a particular mental anxiety disorder, or to be particularly diagnosed as one going through anxiety. And so this inventory is just to expose you to an assessment you can do on yourself. That's why it's a self-report assessment. And then it gives you an idea of your anxiety levels. I've placed a link in the description. You can click on it to download a copy of this inventory. So I'll share that in a moment. Okay, so this is a sample of the Beck inventory for anxiety, and it has a list of symptoms of anxiety, some of which we mentioned earlier. In all, 21 of them, 21 symptoms of anxiety. You have, so you have options from 0 to 3. And 0 stands for not at all. That means if you look at this symptom, probably looking at the past 1 month or 2 months, whichever period you are using, you've not experienced this particular symptom in question, numbness or tingling. So you circle 0. If you look at maybe feeling hot, if you choose 1, it means that you experienced it mildly, but it's not something that really bothered you. It's not something that really lasted much, so it's not really of concern. If you choose 2 or you circle 2, it means that you experience that symptom, moderate level of it. It didn't last so long, and it wasn't as mild as you can as well. So it wasn't a pleasant experience to go through, but it's not so severe. Then if you choose 3, that means that symptom is something you experienced and it really bothered you. It's affected your everyday, way of life. It was severely, impactful. So it really bothered you. So what you do is to read through, look at the symptom, numbness or tingling, you circle if it's 1. Feeling hot, if you feel that was moderate, you circle 2. And then you go through all of it until the end. Now, so this particular one gives you how you should do the scoring and gives you an interpretation. So it really helps. Any of the other forms you get can help you to score it, and then it tells you what particular symptoms you've been having. So you now sum each column, then sum the column totals to achieve a grand score. So now you come here. So all the portions you circled 0, you just sum it up. So this will definitely be 0. All zeros will be 0. So if I come here, maybe for 5 of the items I circled 1. So 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus, that's 5. So you put 5 in here. So you put 5 down here. Then you come to the items. So these are called the items, so the symptoms. The ones that you circle 2, you add them up. So 2 plus 2 plus 2, that's 6, plus 2, 8. And so depending on how many you choose. So if my total of 2's that I selected in this column, I put it here, so 12. Then I come to the last one, the ones that I circled 3, the symptoms I circled 3, I add up to 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 until the number that I circled. So probably I circled 6 of them. So 3 by 6 should be giving me 18. So I put 18 there. So now I sum up 0 plus 5 plus 12 plus 18. So 12 plus the 18 gives me 30. 30 plus 5, that gives me 35. So let's just say that I completed this, and my grand total score, after adding each of the columns and adding them up, I now have 35. So this is how you interpret. So a grand sum between 0 to 21. So my grand total, if you fall between 0 to 21, it indicates that you have very low anxiety. If you got 0, it doesn't mean that you have nothing that made you anxious through the period that you are looking at, but it just means that you are very low on anxiety. And that is generally good, but it, as I mentioned, doesn't mean that you didn't experience anything that made you anxious. So although this may not make you so concerned, it also gives you thought to ensure that whatever steps you were taking to ensure that things didn't get you so much bothered and all that, you take those steps. So that's where the idea of maintaining your well-being comes in. You don't always have to be going through a mental health problem and then you resolve it. If you are in a good well-being, you also want to maintain it. That's the idea of positive psychology. And that is granted you completed it well, because if you didn't, then you may have probably ignored some of the symptoms that you may have experienced. And so although you may be going through moderate anxiety, because you ignored some of the symptoms, you come to fall in here. So between 22 to 35 tells you that you are going through moderate anxiety. So let's take my assumed score of 35. It will mean that I fall between those going through moderate anxiety. So your body is trying to tell you something. So you want to look at the symptoms that you circled, probably 2, 4, and all that. So 2 and 3, you want to look at those particular ones and see. So when did it happen? What situation led to me feeling those symptoms? So you want to examine them so that it helps you to identify in what situations you go through anxiety, a lot of fear related anxiety and all that. And if you score between 36 and above, then there's a real concern that you need to seek professional help for. So once again, you want to look for patterns or times in your life within that period where you felt anxious and you went through those symptoms. So you take some of the steps that we would discuss and also consult a mental health professional where necessary. So I have the link in the description. You can access it, download a copy, and read the instructions that will be given so that you can once in a while take that self-report test and assess your anxiety levels, and I hope you find it useful. So we'll now look at the final component of today's lesson, where we look at what you can do. So what can you do? How can you manage or deal with anxiety? The first thing is to develop a healthy, positive self-talk. And our self-talk refers to that conversation we have within ourselves. that that discussion that goes on in your mind, whether you are conscious of it or not, that informs your actions. So right from childhood, and we talked about how some traumatic experiences could be risk factors or causes of anxiety. So some experiences you've had right from childhood or in recent times could cause you to have certain beliefs. And in cognitive behavioral therapy, specifically with Aaron Beck's CBT or cognitive behavior therapy, it talks about what is called a cognitive triad. So we sometimes tend to have a negative view of ourselves, a negative view of others, and a negative view of the world. And this is a progression. So if based on certain life experiences, certain exposures you've had, certain failures, certain things that have happened to you, you begin to have a negative self-talk where you have low self-esteem. You believe that you are not up to task, just like the little boy we saw earlier. You feel that you don't have what it takes. You have a negative view of yourself, and that can translate into having a negative view of other people. That's where the bit of paranoid thoughts and suspicion come in, one of the symptoms we discussed. So the negative view of others can then progress to having a negative view of the world. The world is an unsafe place. People are just bad. I can't make it. The world, is a terrible place. So those kinds of beliefs are part of our self-talk. So your self-talk is whatever internal conversation that you have that either makes you positive in your way of dealing with issues or negative in your way of dealing with issues. So one way to handle anxiety, to avoid anxiety and also deal with it if you are going through it, is to make sure that you are working on your self-talk. And you can do this by the help of a professional mental health, counselor or psychologist or psychiatrist, whatever it is. Or you can get a friend. And if you have a child or a friend, a parent going through that, you can also be their source of guide or support. Make peace with your past. The past is gone. I believe in the here and now. Then now, what can we look at in the present moment? What are the resources I can pull up to help me address that impending exam that I have, that interview at hand? What can I do? So making peace with the past means that whatever failures you have experienced, whatever past traumatic events that have happened, you want to deal with them, address them as something that has already happened, pick the lessons that you can pick from them, and then move on. When you make peace with your past, you can have peace with your present and your future. And as we mentioned earlier, anxiety is a certain apprehension you have about the future, impending danger, impending misfortune being the preoccupation of your mind. So when you are able to make peace with your past, it helps you to make peace with your present and your future. And so you want to sit down and look at things that happened in your past that seem to be bothering you and worrying you and keeping you apprehended in the now. Talk to somebody about it or go through that with yourself and make sure that you are dealing with the past and focusing on the present. Challenge irrational beliefs about yourself, others, and the world. So this little boy that feels that I can't do this, that is a negative thought. And I have a video on intrusive thoughts and how to handle them. So you may want to refer to that video on intrusive thoughts and how to deal with them. So challenge irrational beliefs, irrational thoughts about yourself, others, and the world. And thirdly, identify and focus on your strengths. Sometimes people have negative self-talk. I am weak, I can't do it, I am useless, I am this and that, because they have not been able to identify what makes them unique, their own strengths, the positive things about them. So you may be, someone who is not good at communicating orally, but you may be good at writing and drawing. So identify what your strengths are and focus on that. That helps you to build a positive self-image, and that feeds into your self-talk. So if there's a situation at hand, you have your own strengths, although there are also weaknesses. So as you are working on the weaknesses, you know that you have strengths, and identifying those strengths helps to boost your self-talk in a positive sense. So if an exam is coming, the internal conversations you are having are no longer about I'll fail. It is about that I can pass, I will learn, and I'll master whatever I learn, and I'll do well. So the self-talk has changed from doom to one of hope and belief in yourself. So identify and focus on your strengths, things that make you unique. And if you are helping another person, you want to help them identify their strengths, what is good about them that they may not know. It could be how they look, how they talk, how they are compassionate, things that may be minor to them, but help them to realize those things and hold on to them. So those are 3 key things you can do when it comes to developing a healthy, positive self-talk. The second thing in how to deal with anxiety is that anytime you feel anxious, talk to someone. A problem shared is a problem half solved. That is something that we usually say. So if you realize that, so I'm beginning to feel that something will go wrong in this trip that I'm about to take. You are feeling tensed. You feel that an accident will happen. Those negative thoughts that are coming, those intrusive thoughts, one way you can help yourself is to talk to somebody, a friend, your parent, your child, somebody that you can talk to about the issue. And if you are religious, the person can help you to pray about it. You can go through some meditation, whatever it will take. Speaking to somebody, a professional psychologist or psychotherapist, speaking to a friend, a loved one, your spouse, talk to somebody about your fears. Talk to somebody about the things that you feel will go wrong and why you think it will go wrong. And through a dialogue, through a discussion with them, you may realize that, okay, the fears I have may not really be the case. So when you feel anxious, talk to somebody. Very important. And this is where people that are extroverts may have an upper hand because they are easily able to talk to somebody, start a conversation. So whether or not you are introvert or an extrovert, one of the key things you want to do is to identify someone or some people that can be your social resource when it comes to distress, when it comes to anxiety, when you are going through symptoms of depression, whatever it is, you can talk to them. Very important. The third thing is to engage in breathing and relaxation exercises. One of the reasons why when you are faced with a very difficult task or you are involved in an activity where it feels like there's so much expectation at hand, taking a deep breath helps. Is that it helps to relax your muscles. And when we define anxiety, we talked about the somatic symptoms of tension, where your muscle cells are tensing up and all that. So when you engage in breathing exercise, taking a deep breath, it helps to relax yourself. And there are breathing exercises that you can find online and follow. Yoga exercises, meditation exercises. One of the simplest things to do is that you put in a song that is very quiet and peaceful. And that's something I do a lot. You are traveling, you have a song, a peaceful song. The lyrics alone can help calm you down. It causes your body's natural relaxation system, what we call the parasympathetic nervous system, to kick in. When you do these breathing exercises, meditating on something, or going through a meditation exercise, or listening to a song and something, it helps to relax you. And that is one important way of dealing with anxiety. The next thing is to cut down on your caffeine intake, which we mentioned earlier, the caffeine induced anxiety. Hopefully we'll talk about it in a different video. But if you are someone who likes taking a lot of caffeine related substances, or drinks and all that, you want to cut down on it, because it's really something that is not helpful when it comes to your mental well-being and anxiety. In moderate levels, in little levels, it's fine, but too much of it is bad. And then finally, with doing all of these things, if you realize that it's overwhelming, you are not able to handle it, or you have a friend or someone who is just overly excessively anxious and has a certain fear of many things, of the future, of situations and all that, you want to encourage them or yourself to see a psychologist or a mental health counselor. Very, very important. Seek professional help. It will help. It will help. So this is just a bit on the self-talk. So your self-talk, whether positive or negative, affects your feelings and your actions. So if you have a positive self-talk, positive feelings, positive actions. Negative self-talk, negative feelings, negative actions. I hope this lesson has been useful. In subsequent lessons, I'll do some things on specific anxiety disorders that we can talk about. Anxiety disorders are characterized by excessive or out of proportion fear and anxiety, which affects the individual's daily function. So we'll be talking about generalized anxiety disorder, social anxiety disorder, separation anxiety disorder, and many other ones in our subsequent lessons. Thank you so much for joining in. Kindly like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and see you in our next video. Stay safe and always remain positive.